This session was really triggered by the article in the Daily Telegraph on the 12th of May entitled HMRC deems May's custom plan unviable. And included in the article, it says HM Revenue and Customs, which would have to administer the tariff collection and rebate system under a customs partnership, does not support the idea. A Whitehall source told the Telegraph HMRC dislikes the customs partnership. They don't think it's a viable option. They think it's for the birds. It's incredibly complicated. It would be very hard to track goods. When it was originally put forward, officials assumed that MaxFac would be the primary option. When they heard it was the customs partnership, they thought, and quote, "You're having a laugh." So I really want to explore the veracity of that summary of HMRC's view of the two proposed customs options on the table.
Yep.
We'd also discussed in September, but just a sort of open question, what is the basis for that Telegraph article? Do you recognise it at all?
We don't recognise it at all. I have no idea what the unnamed Whitehall source is.
I mean, there's two systems being discussed. Some of the cabinet members have described one as crazy or flawed, and then others like the idea. The Irish government don't have gone on record as saying they're not wild about the MaxFac option. And I'm just wondering if the government has asked you to come up with any other alternatives, any other ideas, or are you just focusing on those two options at the moment?
I have to be upfront with you. We've been asked to run these two. Running two at this level of depth is a pretty significant task. We've employed more than 1,100 staff working on Brexit now. I think two is enough for any. We're exploring variants too, or options within the fundamentals of these two options. And as Jim said, there are two ministerial working groups looking at, well, could you do X within this model, or what about Y, and so on and so forth. But the two fundamentals remain as they were. We've not opened up a third fundamental.
And you haven't modelled a WTO arrangement and if there was no deal?
You can model that, yes.
Yes. Have you been asked to model it?
We do. We do have. We are, in addition, planning for the scenario that the UK leaves with no agreement. And we set out in the white paper last year what that would largely look like.
But if you're planning, but have you been asked by the government to? Is that the HMRC being belt and braces, or did the government ask you to do that?
We were asked to provide a contingency plan for a contingent exit where there is no deal. It's clearly not the government's preferred option, but all government departments were required to produce a contingency plan. We did that. We've provided it to DEXU as we're required to do. It remains in the situation that the government continues to plan for a contingent exit, but we're not executing that plan.
You previously told this committee that the maximum facilitation model could be phased in over a 3-year period, and at the same time you said that the new customs partnership model would probably take at least 5 years to implement. Is that still your position today?
Bluntly, yes. But, slightly more.
Blunt answers are good.
Fine. I think
we're going to get a nuance, I think, as well.
Probably worth having the nuance. Yes, but I think it's worth me also stating for the record that we think we have a functioning. We believe we'd have a functioning border in January 2021, because obviously, clearly, 3 years and 5 years doesn't easily square with January 2021. So we're absolutely clear that we would have a functioning border. If we reached that point and it wasn't fully in, then ministers may have to make some choices about trading those three fundamental objectives about free flow and revenue and security.
You said, Mr. Thompson, that since August 2017 you have more information on the cost of implementation to government and business.
Yes.
Could you provide, so either in writing or further down the line, if you could provide the specifics to us, that would be really helpful.
Would you like me to do it now?
If you want to, yeah, that would be really helpful.
So on the highly streamlined arrangement, there are broadly three costs for businesses. So first of all, in leaving the customs union, you have to assume that under WTO rules or under any trade agreement, there are customs declarations required. We know that there were in 2016 almost 200 million EU consignments. So that is the base number. That's been audited by the NAO and is in a report on the Customs Declaration Service. The question is, how much does it cost to complete a customs declaration? We've done some work ourselves. There have been at least 2 independent reports, one by the University of Nottingham Business School, one by KPMG earlier in the year. The answer to that question is it's between £20 and £55. You can't average it out because of weighting, but for ministers we've settled on £32.50 per customs declaration. So you've got 200 million customs declarations at £32.50, that's £6.5 billion.
6.5 billion. Right.
And that's on the UK side. Obviously, there are declarations required on the EU side as well. So
you double that number, probably. So that takes you to 13. You've then got the question about what might be the requirements from the European Union on rules of origin.
Yeah.
Is this cheese from Cheddar?
Yeah.
And so on. Now it's quite difficult to estimate that, but it would be reasonable to think that it's several billion pounds more. So I think you need to think about the highly streamlined customs arrangement costing businesses somewhere in the late teens of billions of pounds to
I've started to lose count
operate.
now at the number of billions.
But so somewhere between 17 and 20 billion. It's that sort of order, and the primary driver here is the fact that there are customs declarations.
It would be helpful to get a breakdown on cost to government versus cost to business as part of your update.
I didn't give you the cost to us.
I think you might
Yeah,
have
how much is that going to cost HMRC to do all of this?
Well, against those numbers, are very reasonable, he said, in anticipation of his spending review. So look, the way in which the Treasury is working is they're doing it year by year. It's a totally rational way of doing it. That's the way I do it if I was the Treasury. So we have an allocation of 18-19. Very, very early estimates of the status quo running cost for us is in highly streamlined around 250 million, and in new customs partnership somewhere in the order of 180 million a year. And the differential is because of the fact that the highly streamlined model requires customs declarations, therefore I have to put more people into the customs hub in Manchester to process those customs checks. That's
And are you having to divert resources from other things that you do to scale up the work you're doing preparing for Brexit?
Not per se, we're not, but because we're being funded at 260 million extra for 18-19. But we did, I think John
last time. That's right.
Prompted shouldn't you reprioritise your portfolio? We did complete a full reprioritisation, and we have stopped entirely or slowed down significantly 39 other projects we otherwise would have done.
I just want to come back to one thing, Jim. I think you were asked earlier on about discussions with certainly Irish counterparts, but I think previously we explored discussions that you'd be having, practical discussions, not negotiations, with other EU counterparts. Is that happening? Have you been given the ability to discuss sort of day one type arrangements with your counterparts, and likewise have your counterparts across the EU be given permission to discuss this with you?
No, that is not happening. All the engagement is with the European Commission. We don't have engagement about post-Brexit arrangements with customs authorities of other member states. We have been engaging with the ports in other member states, that faced onto the UK, and so they're very clear about what the UK is proposing to do in the event of either no deal or, for example, an event of highly streamlined, and I would expect them to be having conversations with their customs authorities. So there's a certain amount of intelligence that both sides have. It would be useful, of course, to have technical level discussions with other member states, but that's not currently happening.
Okay. So I want to summarise where I think we are at the end of this session, and obviously you'll come back on the 5th of June. We're going to have a functioning but suboptimal border on January 2021, where there'll be a trade-off between friction, revenue and security. It takes between 3 to 5 years, depending on which of the two options, or one is 3 years, one is 5 years, but that can't even start until a political decision has been made. HMRC is recruiting about 5,000 people to make this happen, leaving aside people at the border. The highly streamlined option is going to cost businesses £32.50 approximately, averaging per customs declaration. So that's a cost of between 17 to 20 billion pounds a year.
Yes.
The NCP the setup cost about 700 million, but could be ultimately sort of net neutral if tariffs are reclaimed. Just in this current financial year, the highly streamlined getting funding for 250 million,
260.
260, and the NCP 180.
No, both together.
They're both together.
Sorry, 18-19, we get 260 to implement Brexit for the year.
And that's obviously just in the 1 year. And there are 39 other HMRC projects which have either had to be stopped or significantly slowed down in order to get Brexit through. I'm going to ask you an unfair question now, which I strongly suspect that you will not want to, or not be able to, answer. But wouldn't it be a relief if Parliament just voted for a customs union?
Whether you gave me the option to not answer that question, that's for parliamentarians to decide.